It's been 2 years since Xenoblade 3 came out, and well over a year since the last time I released anything Xenoblade related on my channel. And since I am supposed to be a Xenoblade channel, for that you do have my apologies. Since it is currently the 2-year anniversary the day this video is releasing, I wanted to just kind of talk about my thoughts on Xenoblade 3 2 years later, and general community consensus about it. This is going to be a very casual video. I'm planning to talk almost entirely unscripted, and I'm not really planning to do much in the way of editing, so you can just enjoy some gameplay footage from stuff I've done in the past. This is definitely not any kind of video essay. I do want to release more Xenoblade content again. Not sure how fast I'll be able to get to everything, but if you're interested in Xenoblade content, be sure to subscribe. With that being said, let's get into it. So, I do like Xenoblade 3 a lot, but sometimes I wonder if I really like it as much as I think I do. When I initially beat the game, I was really high on it. I really liked a lot of the things it did. I thought some sections were a little weak, such as that section between like the halfway point of Chapter 6 and the end of the game. Well, besides the actual like ending cutscene, I thought that section could have been a little bit better. There were some things I didn't like about that part, but for the most part, I really liked most of the game. I did really like the characters. And I feel like a lot of things really set well with me, especially the 90-minute long cutscene at the end of Chapter 5, beginning of Chapter 6. I thought that was one of the greatest sequences in any kind of Xeno game. And I remember specifically voicing this to some people before the game even came out and really just loving that entire section of the game. I guess I should probably mention there will be some spoiler talk in this video, so if you clicked on this video and you have somehow not beaten Xenoblade 3, first of all, go beat it, and second of all, yeah, here's your spoiler warning if you are worried about that. So, I really do think that entire cutscene with N and M kind of swapping places with Mio was an absolutely fantastic cutscene sequence, as I said before. It's one of the best memories I have of playing this game for the first time, even if the scene has been memed a little bit now on Twitter. I also really like Chapter 1 a lot. I think it was a great setup to the game. And just overall, I did really feel like I liked the characters at the time I was playing through the game. I thought they had a lot of cool interactions. I thought a lot of the side content was really good in Xenoblade 3. I really liked a lot of the hero quests, Fiora and Fiona, I mean, sorry, and Triton and Miyabi especially. I really liked their side quest chains a lot. So those were really good. And just all around, I feel like I had a really great experience the first time I played for the most part. I had very positive experiences of it, so since then, it's been 2 years since I've really even seen any of the cutscenes of the base game now, because, well, I haven't really had a reason to. I haven't really replayed the game. Well, I have, because I've speedrun the game, but I haven't replayed the game in the proper way as far as watching all the cutscenes again since 2 years ago. When the game initially came out, there was a lot of positive reception all over, a lot of people that kind of reinforced the opinions I had, but I did notice that in certain servers and in certain communities, there were people who didn't really like it as well as some of the other games, and just people in general that were very negative on certain aspects of it. Like Mobius as a villain group, a lot of people did not like Mobius as a villain group, and I can kind of get that. They did not have the complex writing that you would expect from a lot of Xeno antagonists, even though that was the point this time around. I can kind of understand not liking them as much. And there's a lot of people that were really sour on the last two chapters of the game, the second half of Chapter 6 and most of Chapter 7, like I mentioned earlier. A lot of people did not really like that section and feel like it felt like a really rushed ending. And I was even seeing some of my closer friends make some of these complaints as well. And even about the cast in general, a lot of the my closer friends felt a lot of the cast wasn't really that amazing and felt like a lot of their interactions were pretty weak and that they just weren't a very good cast, which seemed kind of counterintuitive to what I thought on my playthrough, or at least to what I thought on my playthrough, I should say, where I felt like they did have some decent interactions between the characters and everything like that. So it's just one of those things where I was like thinking, well, do I actually like this game this much, or am I liking it this much because it's part of my favorite series and I feel like I have to like it this much? And am I just kind of rose-coloring the game because of that and just trying to look for meaning and significance where there isn't any, you know? So 2 years later, I'll still see people in my close friend groups just kind of complain about the game even now, and they don't think it was very good. And even in Xeno communities where people like the game generally, they still have a lot of similar complaints, and a lot of people really didn't like some of the art book notes about like some of the characters returning as objects and stuff like that as well. So it kind of soured them on the game even more. A lot of people feel like the writing isn't up to the quality standards of some of the previous games in the series, and it's just, in general, it's like, well, it's been 2 years since I've even seen any cutscenes from the game, so am I just misremembering or just trying to like the game more than I think I do? Or you just get these thoughts in your head like, was it really as good as I thought it was, especially if all these people close to me didn't like it? Am I just trying to kind of rose color the game in general? So it's something that I have definitely thought about often, and it's like, well, when I think about the characters and stuff like that myself, I feel like when I was playing through the game, I liked them, but now that it's been a while, I don't really think about the characters that often anymore at all, and I'm not really sure if it's just because it's been a while or if the characters really just didn't really leave that much of an impact on me. But as you can see by my Biabi PFU now, I still do really like her a lot. Maybe that's just because of her design and because her specific part of the game did kind of leave an impact on me. And I do like Mio and Uni, but as far as the rest of the cast, I don't really find myself thinking about them or really caring too much about them, though, even though I do really think they were pretty solid as I was going through the game. And I don't know if this just kind of comes down to a personality kind of thing or what, because of the cast dynamics not feeling as lively, just because of the kind of setting the characters find themselves in, where it feels very bleak compared to some of the previous games or anything like that. But I do want to at least say that I like them, and when I initially beat the game, I did kind of think highly of all of them because I feel like the game did a lot of things right as far as how they approached the characters, even if they didn't leave as big of an impact on me as I kind of expected. So before the game came out, I really wanted to like Uni a lot, and I thought I was going to. When I was playing through the game, I did like her, but I don't think I liked her as much as I thought I was going to like her, which is kind of just a similar trend here. On the contrary, I would say I really liked Mio even more than I expected. So that is a character I do kind of think pretty highly of even now. But as far as the other four cast members, the main cast members, well, it's just kind of, yeah, they were good characters, but I don't know if I really intensely care about them like I might have the Xenoblade 2 cast or the Xenosaga cast or something like that, you know? And considering I've seen people say they think the interactions between the characters were weak, but I can like recall off the top of my head plenty of times the characters did have interactions, and I do think the writing was pretty good in a lot of these interactions. It's just I don't know how much it made you care about a lot of the cast of characters, just because some of the interactions didn't feel the most lively, and to get you attached to some of the characters and their personalities as well as they possibly could have. Like when I think of Noah specifically, I think he is a good character, but I think his personality is definitely a little bit on the boring side. And part of character writing, I do think, is personality based. It's not just solely based around development. And I think that's one of the things Noah did not leave a super amazing impact on me with. Not to say he's completely dull or anything like that, but he's definitely a more passive type of main character, so that makes his personality not shine through as much in many cases. Like, if I were to bring up Xenoblade 2 Rex for an example, just as a comparison to another protagonist, I remember every single time Rex brings up the Salvager's Code, I remember every little saying he says. For Noah, I don't feel like he has moments in that kind of specific way. Like, there's nothing super memorable about some of his personality and just his little quirks like that that I think make him a character that was going to stay in my mind long term, you know? And again, I do think the character cast in Xenoblade 3 is pretty solid in general, but I don't know if I like them as much as I think I like them just because, well, as more time passes, I don't find myself really thinking about them that often, even though when I was playing through the game, I do remember generally thinking all of them are very good, you know? And this just kind of applies to my thoughts about a lot of the game as of right now, and it's one of the reasons I probably just need to replay through the entire game or at least watch all the cutscenes again, you know? And like I said, there was a lot of aspects about the game I really liked, and I do feel like a lot of the story moments really nailed it pretty hard. I do think most of the story is really good for the most part as well, and I think Future Redeemed just is a perfect DLC that ends up completing the story really well as all well, and I got really hyped from playing Future Redeemed also. We'll come back to Future Redeemed in a little bit though, but for now, just kind of focusing on the base game, I do really feel like when I played through the game, I had a really solid experience with it. The plot in general, if we want to kind of go through that, I really like Chapter 1. I think it was a great introduction to the game. I think I've already mentioned this, but I really like how they introduced Mobius. I really like how they introduced the concept of Ouroboros. Chapter 2, I think, was pretty good as well. That's the section where we meet Ethel and kind of kill our first Mobius and kind of start freeing the town. So it's when the side content kind of opens up in the game. I think that part was fairly well done for the most part. I really liked a lot of the writing in Chapter 4, I think it was, when you approach the Kevis Castle. I think that's a really good section of the game as well, especially for Uni's character writing. That was one of the more memorable sections of character writing I remember in the game. I think the stuff with Jay, this is kind of going back to Chapter 3, was probably one of the weaker aspects of writing the game. I didn't really find myself ever really that attached to Jay, and they really kind of overshowed his death cutscene a lot. I think it's 13.5 times, according to people that have actually counted and make memes about it. And I think for the most part, outside of N and M, a lot of the Mobius character writing wasn't really that amazing. Well, Triton was great, but I don't really count him as one of the antagonist group. And I know a lot of people don't really like In because of the type of character he is, and they don't really think his execution is great as some of the similar characters in Xeno games in the past. But I thought he was pretty good. I thought he was decent for his role and just kind of showcased the other side of just what Noah could have became when kind of driven to the brink. So I thought that part was really nice. And yeah, when the Mobius antagonists weren't them, it was kind of weak. Zed especially is just kind of a meme the more I think about him, especially because Future Redeemed really made him a meme when you kind of think about the other games in the series and his kind of his similar character archetype in a different game that just kind of got more than he did in his own game. I don't really know how to describe this without going into spoiler territory, but you know, it's really funny to think about. I think Zed is such a kind of a meme antagonist character that didn't really leave a kind of noticeable impact compared to a lot of the best antagonists in the series, which is kind of a shame, unfortunately. But I can see why people definitely thought the antagonist group was weak, and that can definitely affect kind of your enjoyment of these stories, and I think it's one of the things that makes Chapter 7 a little bit on the weaker side until you get to the actual ending. If we're thinking about other kind of aspects of the plot and lore and how it kind of connects to the series as a whole, I know a lot of people have issue with a lot of that stuff as well. Like I mentioned, the art book released some stuff about the characters, some of the characters returning as objects. I know a lot of people didn't really like that. A lot of people didn't really like that Takahashi felt like he was just kind of delaying talking about things even further. So I can kind of understand that as well, but I think a lot of that's pretty funny also. So I mean, I just kind of want to see how the execution goes when we finally get to a new game and kind of get a new experience there. I'm getting sidetracked once again though, so I do apologize. Chapter 5, I think Chapter 5 for the most part was pretty good. I do think the prison section wasn't great gameplay-wise, but once you kind of get to where you start fighting N and M, that entire like section of the game, and through that ending of Chapter 5 was just incredible. The city was a pretty cool area. I do kind of like that it actually was a pub world, and I do like kind of the contrast of our characters that live in this war-torn world, kind of seeing like how life is supposed to be. I thought that was pretty cool. So I did like that part a lot. How the city connects to the lore and how they're going to be born in the new world by having their data stored in the origin code is pretty interesting lore as well. So I wonder if that'll be followed up in any kind of future game, even though the arc is over now. I guess we'll find out in the future. But end of Chapter 5, really, really fantastic sequence. Beginning of Chapter 6, that entire sequence. Like I mentioned earlier in the video, I think it's one of the best sequences I've seen in any game, just period. I really like that entire section of the story. I really like the execution of that part of the story. I think that is just a phenomenal section and one of the best memories I have of playing this game. One of the reasons I probably ended up thinking so highly of it, just because everything was leading to that point, and it kind of paid off perfectly. And I think what ends up souring people on the game is just when you get to Chapter 6, the middle of Chapter 6, I would say, that's when it kind of starts to not be as strong. You got the quest for the Origin Medal, which feels like a side quest that takes up time. You got the Chris stuff, which kind of falls flat. When a lot of the rest of Chapter 6... gosh, what are you doing in Chapter 6 again? Oh yeah, you're going to meet Nia, and then you fight D and J, and the J part, I know a lot of people didn't really like the fact that you're not sure what is happening to Nia, and you have to watch Jay's entire, like, character arc finish, and a lot of people just were really checked out at that point because they really wanted to see what happened to Nia, because they were way more attached to Nia, and didn't really care for Jay most of the game, and I completely understand that. So Chapter 7, most of it's basically searching for Origin Metal and then going into Origin, and that section was definitely pretty weak story-wise, especially because X and Y fight, you don't get ending cutscenes for defeating them, they just kind of like fade and evaporate. And X isn't even there if you don't do the uni side quest chain, and so she's just literally not in the final dungeon, you just go straight past her, which is kind of wild in general. That it does feel like that section of the game is definitely a little bit rushed because of that. The Zed fight. So this is a very divisive fight, I would say. My first playthrough, I liked it a lot. I thought, narratively wise, and just kind of as a spectacle, it was a really cool fight. As I have speedrun the game, I've come to realize just how bad that fight can be, because of it just resetting everything if you die, the fact that there feels like some filler sections of the fight as well because of that. But as a general first playthrough spectacle, and when I'm not dying on it, I did like it a lot because of that. I still think Zed's pretty weak as an antagonist, but that fight in general, I can see why people have complaints with it. The final cutscene, I don't really have a major issue with. I think that was pretty well handled. The Rex meme photo comes probably one of the biggest things that came out of that too, which is pretty funny. But in general, I do really like that section of the game, and I think it was a pretty solid ending. Even if we never really got any follow up on the final part of that, but I guess maybe there's always the next game, especially when with the context of Future Redeemed. So overall, I do want to say that the plot of Xenoblade 3 was pretty good. I feel like I liked it a lot. But like I said, once again, it's just one of those things. It's like, well, it's been 2 years. Do I really like it as much as I think I like it? Am I misremembering? Am I putting it through the rose-tinted glasses? And it's just one of those things. It's like, well, I thought the writing was good when I went through it. I still feel like thematically the writing is really good. I've got a lot of friends that really like the game. I got a lot of friends that don't like the game. So it's like, well, who's right? And am I misremembering? It's like, well, do I? And I'm not ever going to be one of those people who is going to be like, well, I'm going to change my opinion because of the opinions of some of my friends. I don't want to do that, and I don't want to be one of those people that ever does things like that and try to fit in more or anything like that. But it's just one of those things you do begin to think about when you see a lot of people that you do respect, just like not liking things as much as you like them. So the general plot and character writing, the thematic writing, I do think was pretty solid my very first playthrough of the game, and I still think it's pretty solid even now. And 2 years later, I still want to believe that, you know. However, there is also the fact that Xenoblade 3 isn't a game that I would say is constantly on my mind, despite the fact that I would say I would think highly of it. It's not something that I constantly think about like a lot of my other favorites. It's not something that I really can point to and just kind of immediately outline my favorite aspects about it, or immediately point to certain scenes, or immediately point to certain aspects of it as, hey, this is one of my absolute favorite things ever. So it's one of those things I think about. It's like, do I like it as much as I think I like it? But overall, I do want to say that I do like it, and especially in the context of Future Redeemed, which I think just kind of completes the game as a whole. It kind of wraps up a lot of the loose ends, although it leaves a lot of stuff unanswered as well. But I will say that Future Redeemed is definitely something that got me really, really hyped just because of the lore implications of the game. Pretty much everything involving the radio had me unbelievably hyped when I played through it for the first time, and the post-credit cutscene has me pretty unbelievably hyped as well, if it is what I think it is, and that's all I'm going to really say about it. If you want a longer discussion about that, you can probably find my video 2 years ago or not 2 years ago, a little over a year ago on Future Redeemed, where I kind of talk about all that stuff and about the radio and everything like that, but Future Redeemed was a really fun experience as well. I did really like Future Redeemed a lot also, and I might come back to that later as well. I want to kind of briefly kind of pivot to the gameplay aspects of Xenoblade 3 now, because I know some people are probably wondering, why did I stop making gameplay content about Xenoblade 3, especially if I do like the game. So I do like the gameplay in Xenoblade 3 for the most part. There are some complaints that I had about some of the Kavesi arts being a little bit slow when the game first came out, especially when you're earlier on in the gameplay of the game. A lot of the fights, the Kavesi arts feel like they kind of limit potential compared to the Agnes arts. But for the most part, I do like the combat of Xenoblade 3. I think it's pretty tangentially and pretty closely similar to Xenoblade 2 for the most part. I really like being able to swap characters myself. And for the most part, I do like combat. I will say having 6 or even 7 characters on field at once does kind of diminish the individual impact of individual characters, which can, in some situations, be a little annoying. And the kind of balance of the game is a little wonky as well, but that's every single Xeno game, so that's not really a huge issue in this specific case. But there's a lot of things you can't really do in Xenoblade 3 that you could do in previous games that I think does make it a little bit less interesting in some situations. Now, combat has always been one of my favorite aspects of the series, just in general. I really love Xenoblade 2 and Xenoblade X combat. I really like the Saga 3 turn-based system. I like that some of the ideas in Saga 2, even if the gameplay as a whole in that system isn't great, I do like that the systems in Saga 2 did lead to the break topple system we had in later Xenoblade games. And sometimes even the Xenoblade 1 combat system can be pretty fun if you really know how to abuse some of the more fun mechanics like topple locking, especially on some of the super bosses. But for the most part, I really do like the combat in these series. Xenoblade 3 in particular, I feel like has a lot of really cool aspects of it as well. It really never really bored me as I was playing through the game. It never really bored me when I was making content of the game or anything like that. I found most of the classes to have some pretty fun aspects to them as well. And just in general, I really like the customization features that Xenoblade 3 has with the class system and everything like that. I feel like it was a really fun system for the most part. When I was making content on the game the first month and a half basically of release, I still did really like the combat, and just in general, I was releasing things to the best of my knowledge at the time and from my own experimentation and testing and just my knowledge of the previous games. And I would say that my builds at the time were pretty good and would help you just kind of destroy most of the post-game combat without pretty much any issues at all. I also had like stuff about how to become invincible in the game if you really wanted to really cheese it that hard as well, you know? And that kind of cheese is the stuff I live for. I really love breaking games and just finding the most broken stuff in games and just kind of breaking them in half, even if it's on like the highest difficulties or something like that. So I really do like the games because of that. I really like being able to break the games. I mean, I do think balance is important in some situations, but in single player RPGs, being able to break the games in half is really fun as long as it doesn't completely trivialize everything, you know? And that's where Xenoblade 3 gets interesting because you see, Xenoblade 3 it didn't remove the damage cap, but it raised the damage cap a digit compared to Xenoblade 2. And for the longest time, I thought that Xenoblade 2 would be more fun if you were able to remove the damage cap. And it's interesting because once the cap was removed in 3, I kind of was able to see the error of my ways. And another game that came out this year, Game Fantasy Relink, which has kind of a built-in damage cap for every single move in the game for like every character. It's different for each move, but everything like that. But it's kind of balancing the game since it's multiplayer. It kind of made me realize that damage caps can be an actually really good thing for kind of just strat diversity and just general balance, if that makes sense. So the thing is, Xenoblade 3 kind of post-game content, if you want to be the most optimal as possible, it kind of just went down to smash spam, where you just kind of get as many damage cap smashes as fast as possible to beat enemies in like 20 seconds or less, you know? It became kind of a very kind of boring loop just to kill the enemy as fast as possible. And I hate to say it like that since I do really like the combat systems in general, but if you wanted to get the fastest possible times, it kind of became the same thing over and over, and you had fights ending really, really quickly without any kind of strat diversity or really fully showing the fundamental systems. This was also kind of an issue in Xenoblade X, but the difference with X is that there were things called Global Nemesis, which had like a million health bars, so you were able to actually really kind of experiment with the broken systems of the game, despite the fact that you were doing a ridiculous amount of damage in those games. Like, the fact that the enemies just wouldn't die and had basically infinite HP allowed you to really go ham on them, you know? And I think that was kind of the thing that made the damage cap being ridiculously high in X not as big of a deal. Xenoblade 3 didn't really have something like that. It doesn't have multiplayer, the enemies have a set amount of health, and there wasn't really a way to kind of customize it like Bringer Chaos Mode in Xenoblade 2 or max custom difficulty to get a ton of health on enemies in the same kind of way you could in those games, and especially without the damage cap. So post-game in Xenoblade 3 kind of ended up being either smash spam or do a really big chain attack to kill the enemies that way. But if you wanted to be optimal, since chain attacks took forever, you'd probably want to stick with smash spam or something like that. And I think that kind of ended up turning me off from the game. And even when challenge mode came out and I was hoping some of that would be addressed, it didn't really do anything to kind of fix the core issue with that. And that's kind of maybe a little bit disinterested in the combat because of that as well. But that's not the only thing. The other thing that kind of alienated me from the combat is, as I mentioned, I was releasing content the first like month and a half to like the best of my knowledge and ability at the time, and even 2 years later, I would still say those videos are videos you can definitely use to beat pretty much all the content in the game very easily. However, a couple months after I was releasing those videos, I would start seeing comments in Discord servers when there was more knowledge known of the game, and a lot of it ended up being kind of discouraging to me, just people like calling my videos bad, or I mean, some people were nicer about it and say they were just outdated, but a lot of people were like saying, these videos are bad and you should do this instead because it's a lot better because you can kill the enemy 10, 15 seconds sooner, you know? And I'll be honest, a lot of that kind of talk was really demotivating. I even see it even now, even as I just kind of browse gameplay content, a lot of people will just kind of dismiss like all of the effort and work I put into those early videos, I guess, if that makes sense. And that was something that kind of really like pushed me away, especially when I would try to engage in conversation a couple months after the game would release in some of those gameplay chats, and people were just kind of being like dismissive of some of the things I was saying, I guess. I don't know if they thought because I was like a big YouTuber that they wanted to kind of like prove their knowledge or superiority over me or something like that, but it was something that kind of really like turned me off from like some of the gameplay content of the game and just kind of wanting to make videos on the game. And I know that's a really, really stupid mindset to have, but it is something that I feel like ended up affecting me in the long term, and why I really haven't come back to make updated guides or videos on the game like I kind of wanted to in the past. And it's also just one of those things you'll like. I saw a video like a couple weeks ago, even, or 2 or 3 weeks ago, that said Signifer is bad and here's why. And so I watched the video, and I'm not saying anything bad about the person. I think he's probably a good guy, and I've seen him in my servers, and I think he's a pretty good guy to talk to as well. But just in general, just seeing the video, and it's like, yeah, well, this is better because it does these things very slightly better. well, does that actually make Signifer bad, or does that make these things better, you know? And I think it's one of those things where, well, you can still completely trivialize the game with Signifer, but I guess if you're able to do these things with other classes as well, if you're able to, like, pass the buffs with the fact that these are Master Arts you can put on Kavesi classes, the fact that you can use Soul Hacker buffs instead, like, yes, you can do that, but I mean, it's not like Signifer is bad because of it, especially when Signifer can still trivialize the game. It's just the fact that, well, it's outclassed by these options just because they are slightly better options because of how the game works. But if you can use Signifer and still beat these enemies almost as fast, if you can still use Signifer to get your chain attacks up really quickly and just kill any enemy in the game in one singular chain attack without too much issue at all, is it really bad, or is the game just unbalanced, you know? And that also kind of brings me to the point where it's really difficult to kind of make any kind of tier list for this game because, well, if everyone can like share arts and skills, it's hard to really find a lot of differentiating factors for a lot of these classes in some ways, you know? Like, if Signifer is the enabler behind a lot of the classes being stronger, does that make Signifer good, or does it make the other classes good because it can take the best aspects of Signifer, you know? But it's just one of those things where you like see stuff like that, and it's still like just kind of referring back to my initial videos where I called Signifer the strongest class, and it feels like people are just kind of still dismissing the stuff I did back then. And I do agree it's outdated now, like obviously, but it still feels like people are just kind of dismissing all of the work I put in some ways, just based on a lot of the comments I've seen. I'm not going to post any of that stuff here, but just based on my conversations and stuff like that, it just kind of made me feel a little alienated and just kind of not really motivated to make videos on the game, you know? I do still think it has pretty interesting systems, but once again, it's really hard to just kind of make guides or any kind of tiering for the game when everything just goes down really, really quickly if you know what you're doing and you're just using the fastest strategies. Like, okay, yes, this can kill 10 seconds faster, but is that really going to make it that much better? At the end of the day, you're still using a lot of these same core strategies for these things to go down very quickly no matter what class you're using, so it's really hard to say, well, this is a tier and this is C tier when the difference is that minimal in just the context of the game's combat system as it is right now, you know? And that's one of the things I really wish Challenge Mode would have fixed. The reason I'm just kind of was a little upset by just how easy a lot of it was and how it just didn't really add a lot of gameplay content to the game, similar to the way Xenoblade 2 did and how it kind of revitalized the gameplay systems in ways that you would not expect, like bring your chaos, really bring damage over time strategies to the forefront, overdrive from Elma being added to really kind of change the game in that way too. Xenoblade 3 challenge mode didn't really change anything in that kind of way. The gauntlet mode was really fun, I will say that, but even that can only be done so often before it kind of gets a little boring, but the roguelike stuff is pretty cool, and I did really appreciate that part at least. As far as other reasons, I haven't really played anything Xenoblade related in over a year. I was speedrunning before, but I kind of lost motivation to do that as well for a while, just because last time I got a record, it had been something I'd been working on for like 2 weeks or so, and Xenoblade 3 speedruns are really long, so I had been spending basically my entire evening, all my free time doing that for those 2 weeks because I obviously worked during the day, so my free time was basically spent doing Xenoblade 3 speedruns. I wasn't really able to do anything else, and when I had finally gotten the record, like 5 days later or something like that, right after I'd uploaded my video or something and like put all this effort into it, it got beaten again. And that's speedrunning, of course, but just in general, it kind of demotivated me because it's like, well, I could like grind to beat this time again, but that's even more of my free time that I don't really want to spend doing this, and it just kind of demotivated me from speedrunning in general. And combined with just not really feeling the motivation to make gameplay guides in general, it was kind of a good time for me to take a break from the series, and that's kind of why I haven't really played any kind of Xenoblade game in over a year. And it has been a nice break, even though I really love the series. I would still say it's my favorite series, the Xeno series in general, and I'm really looking forward to the next game. Which is kind of why I've been kind of not doing things for the series recently. But I do want to get back to making videos about it. I've still had video topics I've wanted to make for a while. Not even gameplay stuff, not even gameplay guides. There's just like actual stuff I just kind of wanted to talk about on my channel for a really long time that I'd really like to be able to get to before the next game comes out, just as kind of a break from gameplay content. There is a chance I may go back to making gameplay guides and just kind of updated Xenoblade 3 guides in the future, just because I know some people have been asking about it, and it's not like I completely hate the Xenoblade 3 combat system or anything like that. I just think a lot of the late game combat isn't really interesting, and it's really hard to just kind of showcase the cool aspects of the combat system if you're going for the most optimal strategies. And if I'm not going for the most optimal strategies and I'm just showing off the cool combat systems and things that you can do, then you'll have people once again saying in Discord servers that my guides are not optimal and they're outdated or they're just not very good, you know? And that's just one of the things that just kind of turns me off from the idea, because yes, I can show you how to use sword master smash spam and kill enemies in 10 seconds, but is that really interesting to do, you know? And then, of course, if you're not doing that, there's chain attacks, which are also ridiculously broken, even though they take significantly longer. But once you get a chain attack, you can also pretty much kill any enemy in the game, also just because of how the chain attacks work. And it wasn't really that different in the other Xenoblade games, but even still, chain attacks in this game take a while, and they're really overbearing in a way that I feel like they weren't in the other games, since you can still beat fights without chain attacks in the other games as well, you know? All in all, I think it's a fun system that just kind of became less interesting as more time passed and people figured more stuff out, especially with some updates that made certain strats even more broken. And yeah, I acknowledge a lot of my gameplay guides and tier lists are outdated now, but I still don't think it's going to lead you astray as far as how to play and have fun during the game and how to beat the post game content very easily, you know? And I think that's always just been my biggest issue with a lot of the stuff I've seen. Apparently, this video is over 30 minutes long now because I've been rambling a really long time, so I apologize about that. There was a lot of stuff I kind of wanted to say and talk about, and I know it hasn't been super focused, but I do thank you if you have made it this far. I guess just quick notes about Future Redeemed. I really loved Future Redeemed. Like I said, I think it's the best aspect of the DLC. I think it really completed the base game and was definitely the biggest reason to buy the DLC in this case. I do wish we got more DLC content for the base game, only 2 classes, and just a challenge mode that felt really underwhelming was a little disappointing to me, but I do think that Future Redeemed as a whole made up for it. It was a really nice experience to go through. I still remember just my first playthrough of it just being a basically 12-hour marathon just over the course of an entire night and evening, just straight. And I had an absolutely fantastic time. I really wanted to spam people's DMs when I beat it and got to the really hype lore dump sections, and I was really unable to, and it really made me upset. But you know, it was a fantastic time, and I'm really looking forward to seeing how the lore implications of the game pay off. Um, Really interested to see how the art book stuff goes as well, and all this cryptic stuff Takahashi keeps telling us. He's going to keep telling us cryptic stuff for years. So I still really love these series. I'm still really looking forward to the future of these series, and I hope this video didn't make you think that I'm not looking forward to the stuff or like not really a fan of the series anymore. Like I said, I still love Xenoblade 3. I still would rank it pretty highly on my favorite games list. It's just one of those things I wonder, do I like it as much as I think I do? I'm really interested in hearing everyone else's thoughts about it. I would be curious to see if you kind of feel the same way about it, about the characters, if you like them, about the plot, if you like that, about the combat, what's your thoughts about it, and how it kind of progressed over the years now. So feel free to let me know about all that in the comments below. I'd be really interested in kind of reading everything about that and just kind of more opinions and thoughts about it. Like I said, though, I'm definitely very interested in making more video content in the future again for these series. There's a lot of video ideas I've had for a really long time. Like, just one, for example, one I've been wanting to make for a while is just kind of talking about the strongest and most broken gameplay characters in the series. I thought it'd be a really fun idea in the future. Need to maybe make an updated character tier list, but I probably want to replay Xenoblade 3 first before I do that, at least watch the cutscenes, you know? So, I mean, I just have a lot of really cool ideas. I kind of want to go back to that best boss battles list I made in the series. I really liked how that video came out. It's one of my favorite videos ever made, and maybe update that in the future. And since 3 is out, maybe even make a worst boss battles list or something. We'll see. But yeah, there's a lot of stuff I'm interested in doing. So please look forward to future content. I'm going to try to find the motivation and time to do that. And thank you guys for just listening to this entire video. I do appreciate it. And once again, please look forward to future Xenoblade videos. I'm going to try to start making those again. So have a wonderful and blessed day if you got this far, and hopefully I will talk to you guys soon.